Welcome to Leading to Prosperity podcast series. Today we are in conversation with Richard Raj. Richard has been in the digital world and digital transformation world for quite a long time now. And we thought we'll take his experiences and his journey in these difficult times of the businesses. So how could digital transformation would help the industry as well as the people, those who are embracing digital at this point in time. And with that, I would welcome Richard and I'll ask him to introduce himself for our podcast. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Deepak. Yes, I'm Richard Raj, formerly head of digital and mobility at Health Alliance, most recently. I've been around, as Deepak suggested, in the technology and digital arena for some years now. I started actually working on this and evangelizing digital transformation, and also the digital kind of is coming in a way several years ago. And now I'm seeing a lot of this actually happening in reality, and to some extent, perhaps even sped up through COVID and the latest experiences we are all having, I'm sure. Yep.
Yeah. Amazing, Richard. Thank you. And it is more apt at this point in time to talk about digital transformation. Yep. So during these challenging times, how do you think digital transformation would help? This is point blank on the face, the first question for you.
I think a lot of companies had or started thinking about, if not already doing a lot in digital transformation. And there's a slight difference, I think, that's going to emerge out of the COVID kind of experience across the globe and impacting almost all corporates and companies. In the pre-COVID and post-COVID, I'll put it that way, digital transformation was seen as something business-wide and quite massive. So the big companies have gone through quite a large piece of work, fairly much transforming most of the business, and it's a large-scale operation. Whereas I believe post-COVID, it's something going to be still digital transformation will be very prominent, but I think the style and approach may change. I think it's almost in a way, COVID is forcing the hand of most corporates to actually transform. And the first part, which most of the companies are already doing, is digital collaboration by force. Before it was, hey, look, let's slowly start to get some people working from home. Maybe there's some challenges. We all have to be in office for a big meeting. But now, because of what's happening is large teams of 50, 100 people are all working from home. And they're all actually successfully, other than perhaps some bandwidth issues, communicating online and getting work done. So it's been, in a way, collaboration is already happening. And companies that have never used Zoom or Microsoft Team meetings or all other tools like Skype are now readily using it. I think the user licenses for these products would have gone up, 100 times in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's amazing stories now, Richard, the way it is going. As you rightly said, many of the people, they didn't even know what the Zoom is, and today Zoom is the live wire of many of the organizations. And using just sort of some communication mode, or what we call it as just being on the digital presence, is it digital transformation from what you have seen?
It is kind of a enabler. So collaboration is the heart of getting things started. So whether you're collaborating within your team locally or within the country or even internationally, I think that's kind of the start of it. So if you can do it more remotely, then the scope of what is possible for you is much wider, especially from a workforce, because the three things I believe are really needed for digital transformation, which is where I'm kind of looking forward to what I might do, is platform, processes, and people. And people was to some extent limited previously to your borders within your company and then within your perhaps wider corporate. But now I think with the advent of COVID and proving that collaboration can happen the way it has, it might become a borderless type of operation. So you are not confined to your company to enable your digital transformation, and you could actually, by means of online and other new technologies, work and have limitless capacity, so to speak. Um, so new paradigms will actually emerge, I think. As far as in the new area, you might have noticed that I haven't said technology, people, and process. I've said platform, because I think that's where the new game is going to be. Technology with your own data centers, owning a lot of stuff within your own arena, is going by the wayside. So I've replaced technology with platform, people, and process. So platform means we're looking at, for example, the Azure online platform is the whole thing. You don't need to own it. You don't need to understand it technically as much. You just need to buy the service, be a consumer, and then innovate on top of it. Similarly, with large corporates, they might have their own, for example, a end-to-end integration platform, or a end-to-end services platform. So platform and large players, which means you don't need to specialize within how the platform works. You just need to know and have your SLA that it will work as expected, and that's no longer a specialty to be within the corporate. It's something is a commodity that you buy. It's already happening largely. Most of the world is on the cloud and using various services online. But I think the next big area is the impact on people, whether people are still confined and they are yours, as we could call it, my team, my company's people, or will it be just a workforce that you actually elect across the globe, and they can do different pieces of work, not necessarily coming from large vendors and suppliers either. So individuals who have been now able to bug out, so to speak, down in Tauranga and work for a company in Auckland might then think, hey, look, there's a similar company in Sydney, why can't I work for them? So that's going to change a lot.
Yeah, that two things are coming up very specifically in place of people there, Richard, as you rightly said. What's happening is, one is the trust within the organizations or the projects and the people has gone up because of people are working remotely, as you rightly said. And also the concept of people working remotely is no more big news, because the thing is, like, we can work from anywhere and everywhere and still deliver the projects. So this is a big story, and I'm sure. Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I think, just to that point, it's a very important point you raise, is what happened is this was already happening to some extent. And there were two types of managers in my experience over the last many years, is that managers who manage by presence, which means you turn up in the office, they see you coming in, and they kind of watch over you and make sure you're not surfing the net, and kind of every now and then walk by your desk and tell you what to do, or just check in. And that was the kind of, I think, maybe the older breed of managers. And that required the managers to be kind of reasonably hierarchical, and people would actually worry, making sure that you're not watching behind your backs. But now the new type of managers that will emerge, already are, is managers who manage by outcomes. So that to that extent, the trust has to be high, as you suggest, and outcomes is what the managers need to understand. So if you say you need to deliver this particular increment in 3 days for me, why do you care whether the guy works in the middle of the night, or has a longer lunch break and spends time with his kids? But if he or she can deliver that outcome, or in 3 days, or even better, earlier, then reality is it'll be the managers will have to say, okay, assess how outcomes are measured. Some of the traditional managers it's very difficult for them to measure things on outcomes. It's more by presence, saying, Deepak was here, I know he worked 8 hours. They might not have cared exactly what you have done, but at least you made you work 8 hours before you went home. So that is changing, So if the paradigm can shift to outcomes, then, as I said, you might be borderless. You could actually say, I trust a Java developer sitting in Kuala Lumpur, but they are really good and top rated by the peer review, that they know this particular thing very well. and in 3 days they'll deliver this code for me, and I'll look at the outcome, I'll measure that, and I don't really care whether they are part of my company or not, per se.
Yeah, that's very important, and I think this will help many of the challenges what we have in the industry for the skills, because now
Yes,
skills will be available across the board, and the skill issue I think is gone. This is the positive of COVID.
yes, yes.
Right. In continuation to that, Richard, how do you think that companies can manage their security and privacy, because people are working from everywhere, and
Mm.
this was one of the biggest challenge in especially you were with the healthcare and some of the banking sector. How do you think the privacy and security of the things will
Yeah.
be kept?
So to some extent, to a certain extent, I should say, security with people working remotely, etc., could be a red herring, because the higher security risk, in my opinion, in the current maturity level of systems and how secure you can make them if you buy them as a service or if you follow the right process and procedures, is that the most insecure option is somebody walking into the office with a USB drive, sticking that in your computer, and you with carte blanche access to the network, do a lot of damage intentionally or unintentionally, and that would then create various other holes for other people to get in. The fact that when individuals are logging, if your gateways and your firewalls are secure, which most companies, that's the first thing they do, is secure the outer world to the inner world, you know then actually the security may actually end up being higher, as long as you're following the right process and you have the right tools. So there will be probably a spin-off where security experts who have a good understanding of how to secure remote connections, there'll be vendors and suppliers. But also what will happen is majority of the suppliers who promote working from home type or remote working options and tools, they will actually have certifications and credibility to tell you how they're securing the access to your network or your private information. In terms of privacy specifically, once again, it's harder to download the whole database and expose secret information. Maybe, say, for example, in the health sector, expose patient information if you're online, compared to if you're sitting there and you can copy the whole thing and take it away, with you, or even print it out. But once again, I think there needs to be a government focus on privacy in terms of people. If you have a kind of borderless scenario where people from everywhere are coming in, there needs to be some sort of a qualification and trust gaining process where you can actually validate, and that could be done through peer reviews and done through your network. So in a way, it will be like a loose blockchain type thinking, where multiple people through your experiences actually give you credibility and rating of, hey, look, this person worked really well and they can be trusted. And you may have to earn your way through of how you can progress. So if you're working for a simple company that requires a little bit of work, you might think, oh, there's low risk for security and they're only doing a piece of code or a piece of process for me. Somebody with lower rating is okay. But if you're working for the Ministry of Health and you say, hey, look, that requires this level of rating, and the companies might say, sorry, we don't allow that kind of activity at all, or they may go loose. And this is the same reservations people used to have maybe at most 5 years ago about cloud, right?
Yeah.
Everybody thought cloud was less secure and on-prem was more secure. But that was not right. It was not correct. In fact, I know I've read all the reports when we have assessed things. Cloud is now more secure and more security aware and cyber aware cloud products than I think your on-prem traditional products. So same thing will happen, I think, in people and trust as they are become more remote and working from home, etc.
Yes, that is absolutely, as you rightly said, things will
Yes.
definitely change. So that gives to the leads to the next question, Richard. What
Mm.
you have been always doing ways of working. Basically, you always, wherever you have gone, when I look
Mm.
back, there was a different ways of working which you have implemented as
Mm.
part of the digital transformation. So how does this work now? What is the new ways of working you would implement with the people? That is one thing. And also the next question attached to it is the millennials, right?
Yes.
So who have the always have, they're on the other side of the spectrum where people have their own views about it or opinions about it. So how do you manage if you have to do something in that large scale?
Yeah, I think two newish, not new, newish things will emerge post COVID, or as we starting to turn things around. One is, if you think about large corporates and companies, even look at Air New Zealand. We've seen them in the news, but most of the companies haven't become as public as Air New Zealand, in terms of communicating their issues and challenges. But I'm sure it will all come out slowly. The fact is, the projects that would have survived would be the ones that were more agile and could actually deliver value quickly. The projects that had to be on the shelf and working away, spending millions of dollars for 6 months to year plus, they are the ones that people will be most uncertain about. Do we have spent $1 million? Do we spend the next 5 or not? Whereas if you spend the first $50,000 doing the last 3 sprint, and the next sprint is only going to cost you 20,000 but give you a value, people might be, I can manage that. So reality would be is the projects that were already broken down into MVPs and were delivering benefits as they progressed are the ones likely to have higher confidence in the new era, where most companies would have to cut their bottom line by 30, 40, 50%. In tourism, for example, tourism-related companies might have to cut their bottom line expectations by 90% for the immediate after COVID. So perhaps let's say everything gets back to normal in a month, unlikely, but let's say, be hopeful, then for the next 6 months to 18 months, things would have to be in that immediate horizon after COVID. Because people are saying that around the 12 to 18 months is when the vaccines will wipe this thing out, so you need to be prepared for 18 months before vaccines arrive and can be applied mass scale. So bottom lines would have to be managed, and smaller, more nimble things will be more successful. That's kind of, even if we didn't know about what we're talking about, that's logical. And as a result of that, new workforce or your currently augmented workforce coming in will be mostly working on using new ways of working and being more nimble. And once they get used to it, I'm pretty sure, just like I have converted from, as you probably know, historically, I've run many large waterfall programs costing millions of dollars over 3, 4, 5 years. And then I've become a big fan of, DevOps, Agile, and design thinking, etc. in the later years. So once people start using it and start to really understand it, not by just saying, okay, this is Agile, has sprints and a few things, but really understanding it, then I think the choice would be that they actually continue to like to use it. There is some limitations, the incremental approach has, which is if you're implementing large platforms, it's very difficult to do that in a piecemeal approach before you can say, hey, we are ready. But if the platforms are going to be outsourced mostly, i.e. you're buying the platform capability as a service of some nature, infrastructure as a service or whatever, as a cloud product, then reality is most of the companies are no longer implementing platforms per se. What they're doing is using the platform to implement the functions they want to implement in their business. Functions are very ripe for incremental improvement, whereas platforms were not. So there was still a place for waterfall, I suppose, in the platform arena. When you're implementing a huge server farm, you can do the whole thing at once. Let's not do one little bit at a time. It makes sense. But if platforms are going out to the cloud and to the vendors primarily, then you'll be actually innovating on the platform is where you'll be. And that's ripe for a incremental approach through sprints and product increments, etc. So as millennials come in and as existing workforce gets used to it, then that may become the way of operating. So to some extent, this has forced our hands once again. And if you imagine if you're doing something for 18 months and you really like it eventually, there'll be always a 10% who don't, and they'll go back. But if 80% of a workforce really likes it, it's unlikely they will pivot back again to waterfall when times are okay. And I'm not sure whether people will be ever comfortable again, that the times will be always good again. I think it'll be always a stop and start for several years. Because imagine if a slightly variant is discovered and then another country goes in lockdown, and then you'll stop again, for a while. So I think this repeat pattern may also happen if we are unable to eliminate the whole COVID virus totally. So the fact is that people will just get jitters. So they hear another thing happening, say in another country, and the prime minister might say, "Hey, look, everything in lockdown. We don't want anybody dying again, and we will wait it out again." So it could be repeat patterns happening in smaller scale for some time.
Yeah, with that, we know right now what's going to happen. I know that you have been doing quite a few strategies and you big roadmaps for the
Mhm.
organizations. How does that change in the current world? Like, and also you're a big fan of Agile and DevOps, where we are just looking at sprint to sprint and focusing on the outcomes. So,
Mhm.
how does the entire business strategy or their business roadmap would impact on the operations?
Okay. I think, I've been thinking a bit about this because I was thinking of writing an article that I've been conceptualizing. So it's a good question. Um, I think a lot of our strategies used to be very long term. You had, of course, a year one, year two, or horizon one, horizon two plans, but that's okay. And you still have to have a visionary strategy to say, this is what we want to be. But the how of that may change, and what we specifically target is our priorities and focal point might change. So in terms of, let's say you are a product company or services company, the way you develop things and the way you go about things, you were building a lot more in reliability point of view. So make sure everything can be done. The processes it was very nimble in terms of just-in-time delivery, etc., etc. But now I think with this experience, focus will shift a lot more on being resilient. So how many companies have saved something for a rainy day? And the answer will be, a lot of companies that may not be as successful or may struggle immensely is that they haven't thought about resilience of the company. Both from systems point of view, I think resilience is a big thing. Plus, in the way the company is structured, the way people are, so for example, if three key risk people get sick with COVID, coronavirus, and you can no longer perform a function, that was not a resilient organization, So I think the approach on strategy and tactics will change from reliability of saying, oh yeah, this is what we do. We know Deepak will always turn up on Mondays, to actually resilience. What if Deepak doesn't turn up because he's sick or unable to for some reason? So resilience will be kind of the mantra going forward. From systems point of view, certainly, because if anything, it has shown us that we need to have systems resilient enough to be able to operate without key people, be able to be, operatable and manageable from remote operations rather than going to the server room and turning something on, etc. So that would be a big focus. And then I think companies will have to think about resilience in their supply chain. So, with the advent of everything could be done just in the moment, because we were so proud, me including, that, you could do the algorithms and calculate your demand on the spot. We have progressively moved from make to stock to make to order. For example, if you're thinking about, production and manufacturing. So you could predict your demand and then make to that order, and because your supply chain was well optimized, you could just get the product into the customer's warehouse or even on their shelf within days, if not hours, if they're local, right? But then with Corona hitting, shipping lines and other supply chain have been impeded. So even if you can get your ship to the local port, there might not be enough truck drivers to take your goods to the warehouse, and people might not be buying your product right now. So perhaps the resilience thinking there would be, maybe we go half and half. Maybe we go a little bit just in time, make to order, sorry, and maybe we should have a bit of a warehouse to store some product just for the rainy day when we run out. That's why when you walk in the supermarket, flour is no longer on the shelf. Some because of panic buying, but other because I think there's some supply chain issues. That, you can't get some key products, and that's what I'm thinking about resilience in the system. will become a big focus.
Right. Absolutely. That's a big story, and I know you would be going through the news that how toilet paper is a big issue in Australia right
That's right.
now. And yeah, getting to the next thing as a leader, if you look at into the industry, what is success mean to you? How do you measure your own success?
I think success has the meaning of that for me, perhaps others, has changed quite a bit over the years. Um, Success, I think, previously meant a lot more local, a lot more about yourself, a lot more, perhaps maybe your immediate team and what the team could achieve. And to some extent, our organizations were geared up like that. It was personal performance bonus, right? There was a 5% team component, maybe some percentage of company component, but it was very local success. Going forward in the recent years, I think success for me has become a lot more global. Everybody has to win to actually to make it a real success. Hard to achieve because it was easier to achieve your own success to hell with everybody else kind of mentality. Not that I would vote in that camp. Um, so it's more global success, which means your customer wins, right? You win, of course, that you're part of the vital component. Your team and the company wins as well. But then you have to think about success. Depends on what the nature of work you're doing. Is the environment winning? There are many factors that are applied. You can't get 100% on every front, but success needs to be slightly wider. In the post-COVID world, and even if COVID was not there, I think going forward, as automation takes over, which is inevitable, but now probably going to be faster, we have to think about success of saying, well, what happens when we put a robotic and AI process in this equation and 20 people get made redundant? How do we look after those people? And maybe 20 people in one company, it could be 2 million across, a wider company or country. So reality would be is that we have to think about the changes we make, how can you make everybody win out of this one way or the other? So, on the people side, as you can see, the forebearer of universal basic income, for example, has started to be has started to come in without us thinking about it. With for example, our prime minister announcing that everybody gets a cut of that 12 million or billion-dollar grant to small companies, individual sole traders, because she knows that without any income, there's a lot more disaster waiting for us rather than actually the country giving some money, extra money, even for the people on welfare that get some a few extra dollars. Because what they've realized is that if everybody hasn't got a level of success or income, then of course our equation falls over. So as much as you can be the best producer, if you don't have consumers with enough money to buy your product, it doesn't work, and there's no need to produce as much. You know, so I think success for me in a similar way has become a lot more wider and a lot less about perhaps just me and a lot more about, hey, look, what are the different things I can tick off? Have I got a happy team? So in the last few jobs, I've really focused on, despite sometimes of where perhaps the company might be heading or whatever the current favor of the day was, to ensure that I can enable my people. So hence, new ways of working has been always something I've pushed really hard to say, regardless of where the company may eventually get to, I want to make sure that my team has those skills. So when that big change comes about, now very relevant, they can say, hey, I can be a scrum master. I know what a sprint means, and I can actually do my weekly planning and sprinting and MVP and all sorts of things without actually having to go through that learning process. So they are now ready and they're prepared for both working and giving great outcomes to the company. But should they have to go elsewhere, they're ready.
That's an amazing story, Richard. It's very important the way you look at it, and also that leads to, it is not that as a person you go ahead. It is basically you take everyone with you, and if everyone are successful, you are successful. So that's a great way to look at in, especially in these difficult times. With that in mind, as a person, at least in our conversations and
Mm,
many times in the past. I understand you have a passion. You have a
mm,
passion for few things which you wanted to share with the people. Would you
mm.
like to share your passion for the people, and also you had few things in your mind which you wanted to get it out? I think that is something which you are focusing on right now. So is this something which you'd like to bring it up?
So there's two parts. Like one is probably professional related, a lot more. So I have since I was a young man, not that old still. um, um, I was a big science fiction fan. So I just want to give you why what I like doing. And I read, I think in my hometown, it was not a very big town to be honest, and it had a library. It was a very small library, but I had read every book in the library by the time I left that town to go to come to New Zealand actually. And the books I loved were science fiction books. I always left, I had a big imagination, maybe even daydreaming to some extent, of what science fiction meant and what all those big authors were talking about. And I even read all the TV series that were actually made into books because we never had TV back when I was growing up, like Star Trek, for example. And as I have observed over my professional career in the last several years, last 10, maybe five especially, I see all those science fiction things that I read about and admired and wondered about have started becoming science facts. Because in reality, artificial intelligence is here in infancy, but still here. Robotics is here. Even things people didn't imagine is here. So hence, one of the passions I have is actually evangelizing and talking about the future, and talking about in more specific terms, as I have done in the last few years, locally and internationally, evangelizing about digital transformation, which is about the things that are happening or going to happen in our near future, that will have a higher relevance to people of our generation, but even higher relevance to the next generation or the millennials coming in Generation X or whatever they call it. I heard lately that the generation born next will be the coronalials, because during the coronavirus lockdown there'll be a peak baby boom. I think in 9 months' time, people are saying. So that's one passion, is evangelizing the future, and not the future like in 1,000 years what will happen. It's like in the next 5 or 10 years what's going to happen. And what I've observed and even documented and watched, is that everything that's happening is becoming exponential. And I think part of the technology growth and the impact on businesses and personal lives, people still are thinking very sequentially. So, because our whole world is sequence, you are born, then you're 1 year old and 2 years old and 3 years old. You don't go 2 years old and then 4 years old and 8 years old. That doesn't happen. But technology and the maturity of things are happening exponentially. We are in the middle of it already. We don't realize it. So AI, for example, within a year will be more mature than how we might have envisaged it to be mature in 10 years' time. So because it's in the exponential growth. So I like evangelizing and kind of suggesting and thinking about how it could impact our business, how it could impact our daily life. And in a more personal level, I found on and off that I like to be very creative. Um, so when I was young, I liked drawing a lot. I thought I was reasonably good artist. I liked building small things. And when I went to university, I think some of that creativity was stifled, because you take pure science, physics, calculus, and that stifles any creativity you've ever had. You have to just memorize all the formulas and know all the equations, and I didn't really have a avenue for that particular creative part of my brain. But as in the later years, I think I have used that in terms of talking and giving presentations, and then making sure it's colorful, making sure I'm integrating the various elements to make it fun. In my teams, when we do things, I take endeavors in business, and at home I build things. I've run out of space in building things, gazebos and gardens and things like that. I never really took up art again in terms of maybe one day I will. But I find that now I have avenues for my creativity. And to some extent, a couple of jobs I can think of, I will not mention specifically. When that was stifled again, I actually decided to leave. So I might have been doing something and I had a bit more creative freedom. And I think it's a real thing is you have to give your people creative freedom. That doesn't mean they're all going to start drawing pictures on the walls, but it's more about let them do things. They are the subject matter experts, number one, right? And hopefully you are hiring good people, so they would be the subject matter experts and you won't have as much clue what they're doing. If you don't give them the creative freedom, then people who are creative, and these are the guys who will bring you the new money, the new value, will feel stifled. And as soon as creative people feel stifled, their heart is no longer in it. They might be just taking your money and earning a buck a day, but they won't be giving you the innovations that will really grow your company beyond where you are today. So I've had personal experience in that, where I felt I was doing work really good, I was achieving a lot of success, and then somebody said, do it my way, do it this way. Now you can't kind of think that far. Then I felt that in a smaller way that my creativity was being stifled. So I think both applies to professional career and as well as at home with kids. They like doing some creative work. I just let them, and they do some. I mean, they've surpassed me already, and they're only 12 and 15 years old. So that's great. So kind of those are the two things: being creative about something, building something, doing something new, innovating something, and also actually looking at the future, the science fiction of yesterday becoming science fact of today. And every now and then I have opportunity to combine both. So that's great. Yeah.
That's nice, Richard. It's very important, trying to give that freedom for the people, those who work for you and also around you, and that definitely adds value for what's going on, and also uh, the information what you want to share and how does things might change in next 5 years is
Mhm.
very key in this. Any information which is very valid, that would
Mm.
help the people taking to the next level. Now we are coming to the last question
Yes.
of our podcast. Is
Mhm.
like, what is that you want to see and enjoy as part of the community, as part of the life across you and around you?
Yeah. That's a very deep question. I think in in the early days, it was all about how um, big you can be in the sense, how high you can go, what you can achieve in terms of personal wealth, etc. But as children coming in, looking at the society, of course, we want to be well off enough to be able to be financially free, of debt, etc. So that's something everybody aspires to be. But I think at a societal level, at working around you, you have to make more people successful because you can't enjoy anything if everybody else doesn't have a meal, 3 meals a day, and you have four, ability to have 5 meals. So I think we have to do things for the wider community and think of them not from a charity case. I think this is where a lot of people think about, I'll earn a lot of money and then I'll give some away. Because reality is, as the oldest saying goes, give them a fish or teach them how to fish, kind of thing. And I think the growth has to be how to enable more people, and whether it is in your small community that you might be living in your neighborhood, or it could be your business community. I think, and to some extent, the future has to be like that, because we need the people will be here whether you like it or not. And at some point, if the divide between the very, very rich and the very, very poor becomes too big, guess what happens? We have historical evidence, revolutions will go on. So nobody will enjoy, and it's not going to be a great experience, or something more, serious could happen. So reality is that we have to have a good working society, and that's why I like New Zealand. New Zealand has always been like that. It's not very divided racially, and sure, we have our problems here and there, but it's probably one of the nicest places in the world to live in. And it also, um, is thinking about the lower end of the society and helping them along. We have a great welfare system. It picks up people. Sure, some people exploit it, but majority need it. So I think it has to be, and similarly applies to the environment. You could be a big company and doing really well, but if you're killing the environment, the company will suffer eventually, or you might get sued and basically go under. But also the people around you, the everybody suffers at the end, and it's not a great outcome. So I think has to be something future has to be, and what I like to see is a wider success. More people are successful, you're enabling more people, and there's enough brains in any country, in any company, to be able to do so. And it's almost has to be mandatory, I think, because with artificial intelligence coming in at a rapid pace, and I observe it on a daily basis, and I read articles, and I keep myself appraised of what's happening. The way it's working is it's going to take over, and it'll be safely taken. It won't be like Terminator or anything like that. But I think it will take over from the way businesses utilize it, the countries and state agents utilize it, which means more and more people will be disenfranchised if we don't enable them. So we have to start training people on new skills. We have to start to go into places AI cannot. There's many places in terms of the way we work that AI probably couldn't. So we need to have a wider success. And as things like COVID happen, and companies, especially like big Chinese firms, billion-dollar companies, they actually think about resilience. And guess what they would think now? They would think, well, our weakest point was people, because they were not resilient. So maybe we should automate more. Maybe we should bring in AI and robotics. And if they do that, then more people will be affected. So we need to start to prepare that and create a wider success formula. I don't know what that is exactly, but I think a wider success formula means more peaceful lifestyle for all of us. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. That's amazingly put. And I think you nailed it at the last, telling that everyone's success is key for our success. And thank you for sharing the lots of insights on the way we need to take care of our transformation, as well as the way we are going ahead in the current situation, and also what is required for the community, and what is your passions, and how do you look at as an individual for the country and community, and especially when you're living in a place like paradise, right, on a day-to-day basis. And with that, we are coming to the end of the podcast, and is there anything you would like to share to the viewers?
Yeah. I'll do a bit of a pitch for what I'm going to do next. So, as you know, I've left my last job a week or so ago, and I'm wanting to create a small business, perhaps starting with just myself, and then with a group of associates and people I've worked with and I like working with over the years. My company would be called Knights Move Consulting, or KMC. And I want to start to help companies in exactly all the things I've talked about. And I want to start to perhaps see if there's an opportunity for KMC Limited to actually help the middle ground, because you've got the very small companies who may not need that kind of help, and you've got very large companies who can hire the big five. And somewhere in the middle, I think that's where most of NZ companies are. Can we provide more custom advice to make them more resilient for the future, make them actually take the cost out, but also be digital. And sometimes people might think they're two different things, and we can focus one on the other. So I'm conceptualizing what I'm calling lean digital. So lean digital would be, you can be effective and efficient, but you can be also digital. So how do you combine the both forces to really give your company a boost, either just to survive post-COVID and come back out winning, or actually that's the new way of working.
Amazing.
So that's all I can say. Thank you.
Amazing, Richard. Wish you all the success, and I'm sure you will do great in your venture. And viewers, this is Richard Raj, who was sharing all his experiences till now. We thank him again from Genesis, and also thank him for being helping leading to prosperity mission for the New Zealanders and Australians. Thank you again, Richard.
Yes, thank you.